This is the Drew swing analysis. So yeah, we're just going to go through some clips here. I put all the clips that I took in regular speed and in slow motion.
That's perfect.
So let's go ahead and start this here. I believe this was a pitching wedge. All in all, a pretty good looking swing. The first half of your swing all the time is always really good. We'll get more into that. Here's a side view. Notice the head leading a little bit before the ball. We're going to talk about that later in this thing. But I put all these clips together initially for the start of the video, just so you can go back and see all these swings, and then we'll go back and address some of the details. Pretty good takeaway there. Club with the top going a little bit across the line and coming a little bit over the top. And we'll dissect that more coming up here. Here's I think maybe like a 5-iron or something. Pretty good move with the ball. Your toes are aimed a little bit right, but the knees are pointed at the target, so I'm not really too much worried about that right foot being back. Once again, great takeaway. Right at the top, though, get right across the line and then over the top. I think this is another, maybe a 7-iron, 8-iron. This one went a little bit left. See that in slow motion. I notice that you have this miss once in a while where it just kind of goes left and just stays there. That's a pretty common thing with the kind of swing that you're doing. We'll talk more about that once I dissect each of these. Here's a side view. Ball quite a bit far back in the stands, but I think that you've been doing that because, this sort of reverse pivot move that you do, you tend to hit behind the ball a little bit, and I think you've moved the ball back to make sure that you're hitting the ball square, which you can, once you make some changes, you can stop doing that. You don't have to put it so far back in the stands. It's not terribly far back. I did this clip in an extra slow-mo. One thing I do want you to notice here, look at your head position right now. Your head position is in front of the ball. It should actually be behind the ball if we're loading properly. And then you move the head backwards to try to get back to where you should at impact, which you're pretty close to where you should be at impact. And then you just kind of stay back here. The finish isn't horrible, but I'd like to see a little bit more out in that front left foot. So that's the final clip. So let's stop here and look at this setup here. That this is we're going to go back to the first swing now. And what I did was I chose 3 swings. I chose the first swing, the driver swing, and one of the side views. And I kind of I stopped the video at a number of different points, and I took screenshots and I put these slides together to show you where you are at each place in the golf swing, and it'll help you better understand what you need to change. As I said before, I mean, the takeaway looks pretty good. Right here, this first, they call this like the 1/4 position. That club is a little hooded, and I think you're doing that to overcome the fact that you slice a little bit. So as you take it away here, I think you can open this club face up a little bit, but most of the tour guys, the club face is not pointing straight up in the air. The club face is a little bit hooded. It's a little bit turned in towards the ground. And you do that maybe a little bit too much, but that's not, I'll tell you, there's a lot of really good players that are in this exact same position as you are right here at this point. Yeah, toes maybe pointed a little bit to the right. You could probably just open that up a hair. The knees look like they're pointed a little bit to the right. But that club position right there and those hands where your hands are actually in a pretty good place there. So it's not too bad. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so this one right here, this is probably like your biggest issue. The takeaway and everything looks really good. And then when you get to the top, you get to a position where the club face is pointed, your shaft of your club is pointed to the right. And it's actually kind of lined up with your toes and your knees. It seems like you do it worse maybe with the longer clubs, but right here, it's going to be pretty tough for you to hit a straight ball with this position right here. That club face, that shaft is pointed, they call it across the line. So it means that it's pointed in this particular image, that would be pointing to the right of your target. Okay. It's pretty tough to make something good happen from there. You do your best to try to do it, and you're pretty successful at rerouting it, but you want to stop getting that club face pointed that far right. Now, the next slide here, I drew some lines so you could kind of see what I'm talking about. On the left, you see that yellow line. I kind of just extended the shaft down so you could kind of see how the line is pointed to the right. Your toes are pointed to the right. That triangle that I drew there, that's actually a pretty good triangle that you got going on, but you'd want that triangle to be more flat. And if your club head, if the shaft wasn't pointed to the right, that triangle there would be more of a flat triangle. It wouldn't be kind of angled and tilted. But you have a pretty good triangle, and that's your left arm and your right arm. That angle that it makes, you create a pretty good triangle there. So that's going to really help you once you get some things figured out. So let's go to the next slide here. Okay, so this is you coming down. Okay, so you were pointed to the right at the top of the swing. Then as you started coming down, you can see how that club, it's amazing how steep you get it. I mean, it's almost straight up and down. There's some tour guys that get close to that, but not that far straight up and down. You're definitely too steep here. And then I'll go to the next slide. You can see where that club face is pointed. It's pointed almost straight down to the ground. Gonna have a tough time hitting good shots doing this. So when you start coming down, because you're so steep, this is a textbook left to right shot swing. So it doesn't surprise me that the ball's always, going left to right. You're really steep on that takedown. A lot of it's just because at the top of the swing, you're pointed so far across the line, so far right, that you have to rescue it somehow and get back to where you need to be somehow. And this is just sort of like the intermediary step of that. And you can see that club, that butt of that club has going straight down to the ground. So let's go to the next slide here. So now you're starting to route it better, but you can see that the club, the shaft of the club face is still pointed straight to the ground. You're coming in real steep here, and it's going to be pretty tough not to hit a left to right shot here, unless at the very end you kind of just turn the face to adjust. Notice your right arm, your right forearm. Believe it or not, the shaft of the golf club should line up with that right forearm right now. That would be the optimal angle to be coming in at. You're coming in quite a bit steep. And when we go to the next slide here, I've drawn the line of the shaft, and I've drawn the line of that right forearm. The shaft should be much more along the line of that right forearm right here. And so from this position here, the only thing you could really do is just turn the club face at the very end to hit a straight shot. One thing that you got to remember too, wedges don't put that much spin on the ball. Driver puts a lot of left to right spin. Wedges don't put that much left to right spin. So I think this shot, I think you hit about a 5-yard fade here, because with a wedge, even though you're coming in so steep, you're still not putting that much spin on the ball. Left to right spin, more front to back spin. So on driver, this kind of a move is really going to make the ball slice, where with a wedge, you might just hit a tiny little fade and feel like it's not that big of a deal. But what you want to do is they call it flattening. You want to flatten out the golf swing here. You're way steep. You want to get that club more along the right forearm. So then let's go to impact. At impact, I mean, you're standing up out of the shot a little bit, but that's a pretty good impact position there. So at the top of the golf swing, you were pointed across the line, and then you came over the top, but you rerouted the club, and you finally at impact got to a pretty good place. You flattened it out last second. But that's a pretty good look right there. Your hips, if you look at your waistline, your hips are pointing at the target, close to at the target, and that's pretty good. You can have those hips open a little bit more, but that's still pretty good position there. Like I said, you're standing up out of it a little bit, but it's not horrible. So the impact zone is not bad, but because you were doing those other parts wrong before, it's still going to cause a left to right swing, even though impact position looks pretty good. That club came from an outside position. It's going to put left to right spin on the ball. But all in all, not horrible there. And then let's go through impact here, or through impact. I mean, this looks fine. This looks like a great player right here. Maybe standing up out of it a little bit. You could probably keep that spine angle a little bit more. You look a little straight up and down here. But all in all, the through impact looks good, and your release there looks pretty good. Your head's still pretty much down, and so that looks pretty good there. So